Order at this time. Today is Monday, April 10th, 2023, 5:30 p.m. Any additions or deletions to the agenda? The only thing we're going to do is we're going to switch item number 1 and number 2 around because we have a virtual presentation that seems to be working now, so we will move those 2 around on our agenda. There is nobody else in the room with us tonight. Public communication from visitors, I will close that portion of our meeting since nobody is here. If we could look at our minutes to be approved from our last meeting on March 13th.
I'll make a motion to approve the March 13th, 2023 regular meeting minutes.
Motion by Commissioner Freilich, second by Commissioner Scott. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries. All right, so item number 2 on the agenda, we have Michael Svet from Pros Consulting virtual presentation of park operations and maintenance study. Welcome, Michael. Can you hear us?
I can, yes. It's a little fuzzy, but if anybody can, I will do most of the talking, and I guess when we get to Q&A, I will, if I can't hear, I'll let you know. But thank you much. Cole, I didn't know if you had any preamble to this or not.
Nope, I just know that we sent out the revised copy that we had earlier today. There's kind of a formula error as far as the acreage and things and communication, so that's some of the things we just adjusted. But overall, it's been a good process so far, and appreciate Michael, and let him have the mic.
And Michael, we can hear you loud and clear, so.
Okay, sounds good. I'll just let you know if I have any trouble hearing you all. The next one, I'll be there in person, so we won't have these technical issues. So I will share my screen to kind of guide me through or guide us through kind of the presentation. Just a quick note, this has been updated since it went out to you all on Friday. We did have a quick staff conversation this morning about some of the numbers and some potential double counting that was going on the parks side of the equation. So when we get to that, I'll be able to explain maybe a little bit more. But first of all, thank you much for the opportunity to kind of give you what I would kind of call an initial key findings. I think the point of this is to figure out how your operations and maintenance side of the equation can keep up with the expectations of the community, keep up with the growth of your system, which is quite extensive, especially for a community of your size, but also just to ensure that you have financial sustainability going forward. So this is kind of a quick agenda that we will run through. Pros, just a little bit about Pros and myself, the scope of work, the magnitude of the system that you have, some initial key findings, next steps, and questions. So Pros is a firm that's been in business for pretty much the last 28 years, since 1995. We've worked all over the country, 45 states, 7 foreign countries. I myself am a recovering Parks and Recreation director. I did spend the first 35 years of my life in Northeast Ohio in the Cleveland area, so I am very familiar with the climate and the challenges that poses to you on an every year basis. Some years winter is longer, like it has been for you all this year. Other years it's a little bit shorter, but usually come April, you start to see things start to shake out a little bit, and maybe you guys are starting to turn that corner. But just having had a blizzard last week, I can imagine it feels like a really long winter to you. I've also done a ton of work in Calgary, Canada, around their parks and their parks operations. And then most recently, as a consultant, also did work in Bozeman, Montana, and done a number of projects in the Montana area as well. So we are very well familiar with not just maintenance operations, but maintenance operations that that are impacted by climate, which is, certainly the case, whether it be Cleveland, Ohio, whether it be Bozeman, Montana, whether it be Calgary, Canada. So the scope of work, data collection and analysis is obviously the first step. We've completed SWOT workshops with golf facilities, parks and grounds. We are going to do a system tour in May, work through strategic improvement recommendations, organizational structure design, and then, of course, work through any questions that the board may have towards the end. So I think it's important when we start talking about maintenance that where this kind of fits in with what we would call the total cost of ownership. So we always look at anything that you build is one-time dollars, whether that be in partnership with another agency like what you're doing right now with go-karts and the remote control track, or whether that be golf courses or disc golf. There's one-time dollars associated with that. And in many cases, that is the easier money to come by. In order to sustain those capital investments, though, you have to ensure that you have the operations and maintenance dollars to support it. I always say that, buy a new car, but don't have enough money to change the oil. That car is not going to last very long and certainly probably won't last the length of the number of payments that you have to make. But the other key component to this is life cycle replacement. You all do a great job on the life cycle replacement side. The challenge, if you don't have the operations and maintenance dollars to support capital investment, is that the life cycle of any asset has a tendency to get shorter. So I'll, just a quick example. If you don't do the preventative and routine maintenance on, say, a playground, instead of it lasting 15 years, it may only last 10 years to 12 years. And then you're into the capital investment again, likely sooner than you wanted to be. So we are certainly, I think, the approach that you all are taking in terms of looking at your operations and maintenance to ensure that you have the resources necessary to financially sustain your system going forward is really, really critical. So from a system inventory standpoint, these are some really eye-popping numbers for a district of your size, a community of your size. I'm not going to read through all of these, but when you start to think that you have 120 some acres of developed parkland, another 139 acres of special use facilities or grounds, and then the number of amenities that you have, 27 holes of golf, an archery range, community gardens, campsites, and then on top of that all, another 161,000 square feet of facilities. I think it's important to recognize that your system would be the envy or what a number of other agencies 4, 5, 6 times your size would strive to be. I'll give you a quick example here. 161,000 square feet of indoor facilities. That would be the gold standard, 2 square foot per person for a community of 80,000 people. And the fact that you have that amount of inventory is really important to recognize. This, of course, also creates challenges from an operational perspective because this is not all just park acreage. This is a water park. This is an inflated tennis center. This is ice rinks. These are golf courses. You have warming houses and multi-purpose buildings, archery ranges. I mentioned campsites. So it's not that you have an expansive system just in terms of footprint, but you have an expansive system based on the uniqueness of the offerings that are being provided to your community. And that, of course, needs to be taken into consideration when we talk about maintenance operations. So I want to first start with golf, and not that I want to get them out of the way, but I think it's really important to recognize that your golf maintenance, your golf operations and maintenance they're a best practice operation. I have done several golf course feasibility studies, business plan work. I had an opportunity to operate a municipal golf course during my time as a director in Virginia. And many of the things that you all are doing are things that we do not come across on the municipal side at all. This is quite impressive, and Garrett and his crew certainly do a wonderful job in terms of not just providing an end product, but the decision making that goes into creating an effective and efficient operation that in turn provides high quality product to your customers. So I am just going to kind of run through here and give you an understanding of the data that has been developed that in turn guides all of the decision making. So of course, there's a best practice manual based on PGA standards. You have a maintenance standards related to every space at both of your golf courses. Even drilling that down into the height of the cut chart and what you're trying to ensure that you're kind of in between the ranges in terms of how tall the grass should be for greens and tees and fairways. They didn't include this, but I think to reiterate the height of cut chart and the knowledge that Garrett and his crew have with regards to the science of turf, they measure grass clippings, the volume of grass clippings that come out of mowing greens and tees and fairways, to give them an understanding not only that you're hitting the targets here, but also to give you an understanding if you need to adjust any of your standards based on climate, based on watering, and whether or not it's growing too fast, whether it's growing too slow, whether it's growing just right. That I have never come across, whether it be as a park and rec director that had a golf course or any of the other golf course operations that we have done business plans and feasibility studies for. Staff is very well defined and laid out, understanding the roles and responsibilities between full-time clubhouse operations as well as golf course maintenance on the seasonal side. The wages, just with regards to planning out a specific budget for part-time employees, gives you an understanding of how those employees not only are going to be worked in terms of the number of hours and the number of weeks, but it also in turn starts to give you an understanding of not just how often they're going to work and when they're going to work, but what they're going to do when they're working on any given day. And this is something that changes not just weekly, but it changes almost daily. You can see there the Magic Touch at noon and the Bismarck, I believe that's probably Country Club at 12. What you see there is two quote unquote special events that are above and beyond just tee times for the general public. That in turn obviously impacts the golf course operation on any day that you have those. So I think it's important as we kind of go through this that to recognize that data is continually being analyzed, data is continually being developed, and the data in turn is a part of is a part of almost every decision that's made, not just annually, not just seasonally, not just monthly or weekly, but in many cases on a daily basis. So I give a lot of credit, and I'm going to simply state that it is a best practice operation, and that any sort of recommendations that we are potentially going to include in the maintenance management plan are likely going to be come directly from Garrett because they are so specialized, so unique that without us being there and seeing the operations for 6 months a year, it would be almost impossible to come up with a nugget or two that takes you what I would kind of call over the top. So I want to give full credit to the golf course operations for being a best practice agency, and also then at the same time, being an example for how the park side and the facility side can and should operate as we go forward. So, speaking of parks, grounds, and facilities, here are just kind of some key findings associated with this operation. So, we talked earlier, or I talked earlier, about the expansiveness of your system and the uniqueness of it and the specialization of it. Well, of course, that comes then with the need to have very unique, what I call lines of service or functions on the maintenance side of the equation that need to be performed in order for you to provide clean, safe, in repair, high quality experiences for the customer. So whether that be aquatics, whether that be facility maintenance, the brick and mortar that you have, or in some cases the inflation system that you have at the tennis center, and then the outdoor components associated with park maintenance. It is extensive and expansive. So how do we kind of start to wrap our brains around this? Well, if you kind of took all of these three charts and you group them into what I would call 7 different key rolled up buckets, it's going to look something like this. You have parks maintenance, which includes a whole bunch of tasks, as well as then the custodial services associated with it. You have very specialized athletic field maintenance at the 3 locations that are, whether it be the soccer complex, the baseball complex, the softball complex, a lot of acreage, 72 acres, and a number of fields associated with that. So that's a serious area of focus during the spring, summer, and into early fall months. Then you have facility systems maintenance. This is the mechanical, electrical, plumbing side of the equation. And I would go so far as to say even structural to a certain extent. So that is one, set of grouping of tasks or functions. Then you just have custodial services, keeping a facility or facilities clean. Then you have the outside of facilities, the grounds maintenance, whether that be landscaping or as you do every winter, snow and ice removal. You have trail maintenance, which is exceptionally important given the number of miles of trails that you have. And then, of course, you do have contract management. So whether that be managing the contracts that you have or the joint use agreements that you have with the school district, or whether that be with the, for the rodeo or for the racetrack or the tennis center or the gymnastics room at Starion, there has to be a certain amount of, shall we say, time that's dedicated just to managing those contracts and managing those relationships, because they are definitely rooted in best practice. But contracts and partnerships are only as good as the accountability side of the equation to make sure that both parties are living up to their end of the agreement. So here is a very thin organizational chart for just the parks and facilities operations. I want to stop here and say that I think part of the challenge that we have on park maintenance is the number of resources that are dedicated to the expansiveness of the system. But I also think it's really important to recognize that you have folks that are excellent in terms of delivering on the quality of services that are provided in your park system. And a lot of credit needs to go to this very thin operations to continue to provide what you do in the maintenance side of the equation. I always say that you don't appreciate, or maybe you have a tendency to take for granted as a recreation programmer, the space and place that's necessary to run programs. Because if that facility is not clean, if that facility is not in repair, those programs and services and experiences being provided on the recreation side of the equation do not have a chance at being high quality. So it really comes down to these folks doing a great job. This also then starts to look at the number of staff that you have, what their positions are, what their job focus is, and what their labor allocation is. This is kind of the focus of our initial key findings is how do we drill down on the labor allocation based on location of work. Same thing on the part-time side of the equation, where these folks are, where their focuses are, and where the labor allocation is. But on the park shop, the part-time wages, I think it's really important that over the last 6 years, this past year was the least amount of money that you have been able to spend on part-time staff. And I think this is really important because you're relying, based on what you see above here, you're relying on these folks, these number of employees to work at these locations and to focus their efforts on this kind of delivery of service. And I think what this is indicative of is what we are seeing across the country is that it is becoming more and more difficult for park and recreation agencies to rely heavily on part-time seasonal work. And that is also a significant challenge for an agency like you, where you're not doing the same thing 12 months a year. You have very defined seasons between April and the end of September, and then what happens October through the end of March. So it starts to become a challenge and certainly something to look at. But long story short, you not only spent the least amount of money, you also in turn had the most amount of money budgeted last year, but then you also left the most amount of money on the table. So it's just indicative of what we're starting to see across the country. Will this change? Will the labor market change? I don't know that we have a crystal ball. We just know that coming out of COVID, that this is a significant challenge, not just for you all, but going to be a significant challenge for a lot of other agencies as well. So what we did in this first blush was to start to understand the allocation of actual labor hours across by person, by location of work to come up with this. So what we were able to identify is basically how many labor hours you're spending managing the maintenance shop in the yard and maintaining equipment and vehicles. How many labor hours are you spending on developed parks, natural areas, trails? How many labor hours are dedicated to the all seasons arena, and so on and so forth. So we really tried to come down to, of the 28,142 hours that are available to you on any given year, how are they being spent right now based on location? And then you also down at the bottom have administration and management to recognize Dustin's position as the leader of the park side of the operation. So how does this translate to FTEs? So number one, I think it's important that an FTE is defined as a full-time employee equivalent. We are counting one FTE as 1,920 annual hours of available work. Why 1920 and not 2,080? Well, you have typically at the very least, you have 2 weeks of personal time built into that 2,080. And then you typically have about 10 holidays a year on average. So that reduces the available working time for every full-time equivalent, by 160 hours. And so we're using 1920 as the annual hours. And so you can see that the most amount of labor is dedicated to the Starion Sports Complex Not surprising given the expansiveness of the facility indoor being a 12-month-a-year operation, but then also the outdoor components as well. The other one is the sports complexes, which is almost just over 3. Important to recognize that park and trails, right now, you are dedicating a grand total of 2.4 FTEs, only 2.4 FTEs to your park and trail system, which is probably the area that we're going to see here in a second is probably the lightest in terms of the amount of time allocated on the maintenance operation. So we in turn then, and I know it's a lot of detail, but we in turn basically took the total actual annual hours for every one of these locations and utilized best practice annual labor standards that we have developed, and we have adjusted these for climate. We have adjusted these for the partnership agreements that you have in place, and adjusted them, for all of that. At the end of the day, you're approximately 15,513 labor hours short in terms of living up to best practice standards in terms of labor hour allocation. I think it's important that we note that the administration and management side of the equation is one area where adding a full-time employee to be the person that not just directs staff, but in many cases is the one that directs and develops and evaluates and analyzes the administration of the maintenance plan that you were to put in place. Give you a really good example. One of the things that will certainly be a recommendation is for you all to consider the implementation of a GIS asset management based work order management system. Bozeman, Montana, Calgary, Canada, 2 of the locations that we have worked on with regards to this maintenance operation have utilized this kind of system to really analyze and understand the workload and where the data is pointing us. Very similarly to some of the work that Garrett is doing on the golf course side. So there will be a recommendation that you need an additional full-time employee just on the administration side. Then that's the person that develops all the work, manages all the contracts, and then you have another individual that reports directly to that person that is responsible for executing it with the staff and ensuring that staff is directed accordingly. And that is also then a person that can actually be available on the troubleshooting side of the equation and or if special projects need that level of attention. So where do we need staff? Our initial analysis is that you need the most amount of staff on the parks and trails side of the equation, about 4 FTEs, and then a smattering of additional staff level at the various facilities. One of the things that we will have to dive into a little bit is the amount of work that is being done by third-party contractors, in particular on the MEP side of the equation for facilities. The initial blush in looking at that is that might, spread out across Dakota, spread out across the tennis center, the All Seasons facility, and Starion in particular compressor maintenance related to the ice rinks. That might get you, might reduce the overall need by a half to maybe 1 full-time employee. But we feel like there's opportunities to improve upon the MEP preventative maintenance side of the equation, in particular on the facility side. So again, it's important to recognize we're doing this within that total cost of ownership. And our next steps are to do some allocation with regards to the budgets, the line item budget in particular, breaking the park side down and ensuring and understanding how the money flows for the maintenance, for all the things that are involved in the actual parks maintenance budget. We recognize that Raging Rivers has its own separate budget. We recognize that the All Seasons Arena has its own separate budget. Starland might have its, as I recall, does have its own budget as well. So it's a matter of kind of taking the park budget and breaking it down and understanding how the money's being spent. We will work through maintenance standard development and then work through the strategic recommendations. Right now, the plan is to be in front of you with what we would call a more complete analysis and recommendations within the next month. So at this point, I know that's a ton of information, but I'll take any questions, concerns, comments, suggestions that you may have.
Thank you, Michael. Commissioner Meshke here, I think you probably told us a lot of the things we already knew. We have good people that are doing good things here. As we continue to grow, we knew something would have to give, and I guess it's eye-opening to me when you look at the FTEs and where we're at. I know Cole's been telling us for the last couple of years we're going to have to add some staff to be able to take care of what we do, and I think we all know that. So yeah, a more thorough study, I guess, once I see that, can be easier to budget for and look down the road and what we need to do here. Mandan Parks and Rec, but thank you. I did have one question. So when you talked about kind of our seasonal work, what do you see across the country? Do you see companies and organizations adding more full-time employees or FTEs, or are they trying to do more with the seasonal? What do you see them doing?
I think that, yeah, to answer your question, I think first of all, based on your comments, I think intuitively, I think that has been I'll stop this share. That has been kind of what I have heard from staff, is that I think intuitively this makes a lot of sense, but I always like to say nothing squashes or affirms an opinion like a number. So we're really trying to dive into the data to help that. In terms of how do you start to close the gaps? I think the part-time, full-time employee thing is a very real situation that we're continuing to monitor as we jump into 2023. And I think the way people have tried to figure out how to save a little bit of money on the parks maintenance side of the equation isn't necessarily looking at it through the lens of seasonal work, but what are the things that you can, if you have a market of private sector businesses or labor force that can support it, is what can you third party contract out? A lot of folks have contracted out some very basic services that don't require the divesting of, shall we say, vehicles and equipment, such things as custodial services across park systems and facilities. That is one thing that might in turn help overcome some of the labor shortages that you may have. And the other thing I think is really important is ensuring that you have at least one person on staff that understands the specialization of running indoor facilities. And because it makes it, if you don't have that expertise and you don't have that on staff, even if the decision is to say, we need to contract out and have all of that stuff under third-party contractors to ensure that the MEP work is done and it's up to date and we're not falling behind, and we're not going to put ourselves in a situation where, we're not doing the maintenance on those systems on schedule, which in turn creates more costly repairs. But you still need to have somebody that understands the language to that. And you just can't put it out there and assume then that the person or the company that you do that contract with in turn is doing everything that they're supposed to be doing. And so I've always, it's not that you need to backfill any of the MEP stuff on staff. It's just important to recognize you should have at least one person on staff that can speak that language and understands the nuts and bolts and the logistics of it to ensure that if we start to make up the difference on some of the FTE counts on the facilities maintenance side through third-party contracting, which I know you do a lot of now, it just might need to be enhanced, that at the very least you have the assurance that those third-party contractors are doing what they're supposed to do.
Thank you. Anything else for Michael?
Michael, this is Commissioner Mutter. Real quick question, and the one that threw me for a loop was when I saw the parks and trails for four more FTEs. Can you explain how you guys got that a little bit? Because that one just seems like it's like, holy crap, that's a lot of full-time people already. So.
Yeah, it is. And so there are some pretty strong standards around park maintenance that have been tried and true in a lot of parts of the country. But I'll give you, let me see if I can share my screen really quickly one more time. It gets loading. So let's go back to here. Let's go back to this 121.6 acres of just developed parkland. That equates to, you guys have right now, what did we say? We said you had about how many people dedicated? I'm sorry, I'm going to go back here really quickly. You have basically right now 2.4. So if we take that 121 acres of parkland, divide that by 2.4, that means for every full-time equivalent, you currently, every full-time employee equivalent, every FTE is managing 50 acres of developed parkland. And there's no possible way, even with a 6-month-a-year operation, that you are doing anything but the bare bones basics with regards to managing your parkland. The typical standard that we would see, even for your climate, would be at most, if you were to manage to a level 1 or a level 2 standard, it would be 1 FTE for every 20 acres of parkland. So that is why we're kind of looking at this. Now, one of the things that I think we are going to need to do is not just do the budget allocation, but we're going to need to take the park maintenance standards or those lines of service and really understand what's being done and also what's not being done. I don't want to say on a park by park basis, but at the very least across the system to give us an understanding if we need to reduce that number from 4 down to 3 or possibly 2.5. Thank you. Yeah, the labor hour allocation in turn helps to drive that 1 FTE for every 15 to 20 acres of parkland.
Michael, Commissioner Meshke here again. I know when you look at straight numbers, are you taking in consideration like our universal playground, which maybe doesn't have maybe the mowing and our ballparks that are artificial turf? We're looking at putting more artificial turf. Do you take that in consideration when you come up with those numbers as well?
Well, we did take we did separate out the sports complexes from the park numbers, and we feel like you're really close to where you need to be in terms of the ball field side of the equation. Same thing on the synthetic turf. Synthetic turf certainly requires about 1/3 of the labor hours that you would for a rectangular field of grass. So yes, that needs to be taken into consideration as well. So I don't necessarily think, again, we're that far off on most of it. I think it's just understanding the system a little bit better on the parks and trails side to give us enough, because that's where the big bulk of the money, or not money, but the needed FTE is. And as I said, it's initial findings. There's certainly going to be additional conversations around standards, which are the tasks and frequency of the work that's being done, to understand the gaps to that, as well as then the budget allocation.
Anything else for Michael?
Michael, this is Cole, and again, thank you for all the information, your time on this. Can you kind of go back to slide 22 where it breaks down the hours and just trying to get a comparison of the hours that are allocated with the current FTEs that we have today? I guess my question with that would be, you mentioned earlier the size of our community for the amount of amenities that we have. How do we relate as far as how many hours we're allocating towards sports complexes and the Starion Sports Complex, which obviously are two highest ones, but in relation to communities our size, I guess, is that normal for the amount of hours that we should be spending, or are we spending too much? Because that's some of the other issues with the report is if we're spending too much hours on maintenance, for example, ball diamonds, and we're not charging certain dollar amounts to offset that, do we have our standards of maintenance kind of falling in line? Because if we're putting too much maintenance into something and not getting much in return, we can lower the tier of maintenance to offset some of these FTEs.
Cole, is that a question of me?
Correct. Yeah, it's a question for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think you guys are providing, and I will say this, I think that you look at destination parks, and this is what jumps out at me from looking at what you're directly responsible for managing and maintaining. So the things that you have the most direct interaction with, in terms of what you're doing on the recreation and operations side, and then what you're managing and maintaining, is where you're spending your dollars and cents, where you're actively trying to engage people in using spaces and places. So you are providing what I would call a level 2 to a level 1 standard for your destination parks, which are really just the two parks that have the warming shelter and the multi-purpose building. You're also providing a high level, probably very close to level 1 services at your athletic field complexes as well. And I think one of the conversations that we have had is a lot of time and energy is spent just in terms of putting lines down, and the advance of technology to actually having robo-liners do that work for you may in turn cut back on the amount of labor that's needed at sports complexes if you were to go that route. And that in turn then could mean that you could redistribute some of that towards parks. The other area that I see that you're spending a ton of time at is, again, Raging Rivers and Starion. Starion, I think, has likely a need to increase the amount of maintenance, whether that be on the custodial side or the MEP side of the equation. But I think we might be able to refine those numbers as well as we get into the discussion of task and frequency. So there's always opportunities to reduce the level of maintenance that in turn allows you to redistribute the allocation of hours. The challenge with that is always going to be just meeting the expectations of your community, and if that'll be okay to them. Hopefully I answered your question.
Nope, that's perfect. Thank you.
This is Commissioner Mutter. Real quick here, because we keep adding more things, can you, and I know you're talking about the new software that they can use and this and that, But is there a way, and I'm going to just throw out like the go-kart track, for example, that is going to be run by another entity, but is there a way for us to be ahead of the game and find out the future of what it's going to cost us in the end? So if we add any more future projects, can it help? How can we take this information and keep going in the future?
I would say that one of the things that we are going to do is develop a set of guidelines that says for every X amount of acreage and type of acreage, every X amount of square foot and type of facility, that if you add that to your system and you are directly and or partially responsible for the maintenance and operations of that, we're going to provide you some guidelines around the amount of resources that you need to add, so that you don't end up, just spreading it out that much further.
Thank you.
That comes back to, exactly what you're talking about is understanding that total cost of ownership, that everything you add comes with an operations and maintenance cost. Because at the end of the day, you're still owning it, or it's still going to be on your property.
I think commissioners, just to add, since 2015, we've done over $58 million worth of construction. And of that, we've only added, we reduced 2 full-time employees when COVID hit, and then we brought them back. Plus, we added 1 more at parks and 1 more at golf. So in $58 million worth of construction, we really haven't added a whole lot of staff, and we knew this was coming. And I think that's why we did this plan, is to get a good handle on where we need to put staff, what type of staff we need, and how do we go and build it into the budget. And we know it's going to have to be tiered, so much in 24 if possible, 25 and 26. And I think we realize that, this storm that we come, we're spreading our staff thin during the winter months. And I think Dustin said it best, and maybe it's the other way to look at it too, but we have 12 months of facilities now, where before we probably had 3 or 4 months where it was a slowdown time. Not necessarily we had things to do, it just wasn't as busy as it has been. And that's kind of where now we're having our staff and the ability to try to figure out where we can go. And we've had discussions about a park operations and a golf operations manager that oversees everything on that component. We've also talked about when the all-season arena comes on, we don't have that taken into consideration yet. And we know that there's 1.5 staff being allocated there from the school district. And then whatever we do on the upstairs, that all-season arena is coming along. And then we go into our new maintenance building that we're looking at that's coming on. All those things have expenses and responsibilities to it. And we're just trying to figure out where that needs to go. I don't know if you want anything to add.
And I think, Cole, we knew that this was coming. We always kind of anticipated, we can't grow this fast without, putting more resources towards our facilities. They're obviously still somewhat new in a lot of our eyes, but we want to continue to keep them. Michael, you said it, and it was nice to hear it from an outside perspective, is what we provide here at Mandan Parks Direct for our size of our community is remarkable. And it has a lot to do with the people that are sitting at that table over there and that are working on the ground every day. So it's nice to hear that from an outside entity as well.
And Terry and I were talking before this, we were saying, for the size of our community, for the amount of revenue that comes in our facilities is only obtainable because of Bismarck being across the river. I mean, we have, a metropolitan population of about 130 to 150, whatever that number is with some of the county. But all those people are coming into our facilities that we don't have the tax base, but we have the revenue coming in, and that's why we're able to do some of the things that we're able to cash flow.
Correct. Yep. And a communities full of very generous businesses that are partners with us too. But the numbers that Michael presented are astonishing, really. Eye-opening for sure. So we appreciate it, Michael, and look forward to seeing you in May for a full presentation in person, hopefully.
You got it.
Yeah, we'll try to get rid of the snow by then. All right. Well, thank you, Michael, for joining us this evening, and we'll see you in May.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you very much for the opportunity to work with you all and hopefully continue to set you up for success as you go forward.
Thank you.
All right. Have a great night. Thanks, folks.
Okay, we'll move back to, up to item number 1 on our agenda. The presentation of bids for Ferris Field and Youth Baseball Complex renovation. Dave?
Good evening, President Meshke, Commissioners. Tonight, we're here to just talk a little bit about the Ferris Field and baseball construction bids that we opened on March 30th. They came in a little higher than we anticipated, higher than the engineer's estimates. So Cole and I and the baseball club kind of sat down and we're leaning to the directions of rejecting both Ferris Field and the baseball bids for now. And we're looking for, that's my recommendation for approval for you guys, and then turn around and rebid Ferris Field in May with the help of KLJ. And then we want to rebid in November for the baseball construction for 2024 is what the baseball club had talked about. So I can answer any questions that you guys would have, numbers or anything like that. So
With having it rebid in both projects, were there things that were going to be maybe cut from that or put more alternates in there? What would the plan be, I guess,
So we're
Ferris
gonna,
Field and for baseball?
So for baseball, we'll be eliminating a lot of alternates. They have the scope narrowed down to what they want to do now. They know the price tag of what it is now, and we're going to sit down on Wednesday and eliminate a lot of things that were in there that we feel we either can do in-house or we don't even do them at all right now. So that's what we're going to do with the baseball club on Wednesday. In Ferris Field, the same way. We've talked to some contractors. We feel we're going to get some more competitive bids for the Ferris Field, especially the dirt work, things like that, because the dirt work was all out of state. So mobilization fees were high. So we feel like we can get some of that done this year and then turn around and do fencing and seeding and acre lime in the spring. So.
Okay.
So just to go through a little bit on the cost for rebidding Ferris Field and the construction in the engineering cost for the new process would be, I'm gonna be looking for a motion for $43,200 for the cost for KLJ to rebid and to administer the construction project.
Any questions for Dave?
Dave, the baseball people are okay with this, delaying it this far out?
Yeah, that's the recommendation I got from the Mandan Baseball Club is to for them to be able to raise more money, wait till November. Hopefully, we can get more competitive bids for next year and reduce the amount of unknowns from the contractors, because with 11 alternates, it was, or whatever it was just too many things, I think, for people so the price was a little higher. So the scope will be narrowed, and that's the route we want to go. Plus, with the snow, we're going to have hopefully a longer construction season next year, but we'll see what happens. But yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to add, Commissioners, if Dave, you could just talk about a little bit with the timeline. So with Ferris Field, I'm aware of the timeline, but I think they need to understand what we're trying to do in the first part of 23 and then what's going to happen in 24.
Yeah, so what we're thinking is we're going to rebid it in May, open bids at the end of May, and then we will give the contractors until October 31st to do a certain portion of the construction, which would be probably the dirt work, that kind of stuff, and then turn around once the snow melts. They can go back in there and have another full season of putting, agrolime, fencing, seed grass, those types of things for 2024, and then we'll hopefully have a year of growth, and then play out them in 25 or 26.
Cole, did this study have Ferris Field involved?
No, it did not add the additional 2 extra fields, no.
Okay. Well,
Dave, so would there be 2 separate motions necessary for the rejection of the bid process and then a separate one for the KLJ funds that would be needed for the new study or the adoption?
So if we get a motion to reject the bids for baseball and Ferris Field, because that was a combined project,
Yep.
and then turn around and get a motion to rebid Ferris Field with the dollar amount of $43,200.
Okay. Well, I would make the motion to reject the current bids for the baseball and Ferris Field, and then rebid the Ferris Field in May and rebid the baseball project in November.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Scott, second by Commissioner Mutter. Any further discussion? Okay. Commissioner Scott?
Aye.
Commissioner Freilich?
Aye.
Commissioner Mutter?
Aye.
Yes from me as well. Motion carries.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks.
I would also make the motion to budget for $43,200 to cover the expense of KLJ's further work on this project.
Okay, motion by Commissioner Scott,
I'll second.
second by Commissioner Freilich. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Commissioner Scott?
Aye.
Commissioner Freilich?
Aye.
Commissioner Mutter?
Aye.
Aye for me as well. Motion carries. All right. Moving on to item number 3, Commissioner and staff reports. Anything else? Cole?
Just to add, we did move the administration portfolio, which I know you'll get to at the end, but we did move it to August 25th, just for some formalities. And then just want to know, I've had a few questions about the kiosk on McKenzie and 46. It has been turned insurance. We got the check last week. Obviously, when weather allows, we'll get it repaired when the temperatures and the not having to pay to heat the building. And then overall, I'll let the staff talk about, we get a lot of calls and requests for our facilities because we have synthetic turf, and so we're starting to kind of balance that out. So I'll let them kind of share that.
Sure. First of all, nobody said that we didn't break the record, snowfall record. They, not yet. Done a good job. Spent the last couple of weeks moving snow off the 2 turf fields. Had moved some snow, had more snow and wind, had to go back in, do it again. The heat has really helped us melt things. It's been tonight, volunteers doing some shoveling at the baseball field and moving some more snow bleachers up at Starion today. So we're getting there. The fields are usable. It's nice. They're open. They're usable. Probably not concessions. We won't have the plumbing out of baseball installed, so concessions, bathrooms probably won't be used. But yeah, we're moving snow. Other than that, the grass fields, it's just going to have to be naturally melt. Soccer, we've still got 2 to 3 feet. Softball, base, youth ball, diamonds, same way, 2 to 3 feet with probably 4 or 5 foot drifts still in front of the dugouts and stuff. So these warm temperatures are helping us a lot. So yeah, it's been a trying year moving snow and a long year, but I gotta say kudos to the staff for getting it done. Appreciate what they've all done and everybody's help. So yeah, we're there and they're practicing today, so that's good. Just thanks to Dustin's guys to get that snow moved. I mean, it's been a real blessing to have the turf fields to do that stuff. They started practice today at baseball and sports complex for soccer, track and softball. All 3 played on the sports complex today, so it's good. First game's Thursday, baseball, and soccer. We have a middle school game Thursday, varsity game Friday. So we're starting. It's not going to be perfect, but we're going. So
Track meets on schedule, or?
track meets, we're waiting. There's one we canceled for Friday, and then we're waiting until the end of the month. Hopefully the 27th or 28th would be the next one we'd have to have. So the track will be ready for them to run on. It's just the field events we're waiting on. So yep. One more thing. The McClellan House down by the baseball field, demolition started in full force today. Looks like they've got the roof off and working on the rest of the house. So hopefully within next 2-3 weeks, a month, that we have a nice flat lot there where we can work with someday.
Okay.
Also getting calls from other people to use the facility too. So I've been trying to, now that I know what we're doing, University of Mary is probably coming in this weekend to play. So just going to be filling the fields with other users too. So.
Okay, thanks for the updates. Commissioner Mutter.
I'm just going to give kudos to Dustin and staff. I haven't actually missed very many days walking on the bike paths or the trails. So I got to thank Dustin and his crew, and they haven't even run me over this year even. So thanks, Dustin. So
Commissioner Freilich?
I've got nothing.
Commissioner Scott? Nothing. I thought you were going to ask if they could go move some snow off one of the golf courses. No? Probably better not do that. No, and just kind of reiterating what we saw here today and what, how big of our district has become. And again, it's because of people like you guys that we're able to do what we are doing. And I know it makes our job as a board a lot easier when those things happen. So we do appreciate it. So, all right. With that, can we pay our bills?
I'll make a motion to authorize payment of the monthly bills.
Okay, motion by Commissioner Freilich,
I'll second.
second by Commissioner Mutter. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, motion carries. Future meetings for park commissioners, April 20th, DCP Advisory Spring Meeting will be at noon at the Mandan Raging Rivers Park Administration Building. Admin portfolio will be April 25th now at 8 a.m., correct? 8 a.m. at Raging Rivers Admin Building. April 28th, Golf Portfolio Spring Meeting, 10:30 a.m. at Prairie West Golf Course. And then our next regularly scheduled meeting will be May 8th, right here at 5:30 p.m. With that, can we get a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
Motion by Commissioner Mutter,
I'll second.
second by Commissioner Freilich. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.